Welcome back to the Wayfarer channel. Now, before I share any further insights from my practice and experience so far, I would like to expand on what could be described as my current philosophical approach, as well as the framework that I'm engaging with as my sort of working hypothesis, let's say. Now, none of this is intended as a prescriptive formula, so for some listeners, this may not be the right approach for your spiritual journey. But for others, and particularly a certain group of men of a certain disposition, I'm pretty confident this will resonate. Now, as a coach and a teacher by vocation, I naturally think and communicate in a sort of teaching style. So listen to this with the understanding that I'm not explicitly instructing you to do anything. Rather, I'm just expressing things in the best way I can. So let's get into it. I believe the path to self-mastery is one of a razor's edge, balanced between immense wonder and immense terror, a sort of frenzied, intoxicating ecstasy, and moments of profound frustration, tension, and even despair. To understand the architecture and foundations of the mental landscape, we really need to start by taking it all apart, bit by bit. Before one can truly approach the truth, the capital T truth that is, a person must take a radically honest inventory of what they actually know. Not what they believe, not what they hope, not what they've been told, but what they know with the hard clarity of direct experience. What they can point to and say without any evasion, without any self-deception, that this I know and this I can trust. This is our first task, and it is not for the faint-hearted. For to undertake it is to take that first step onto the rope. Most will flinch and fill the gaps with collected views, opinions, and the comforting illusion of their beliefs. Yet, if one is sincere, intellectually and philosophically honest, then I believe there is no other path. Upon confronting the stark reality of just how little one actually knows, an attitude adjustment towards precision becomes our essential guide. It's here one must shift from seeker to technician, and the technician can no longer drift on the currents of blind belief or any established institutions or even preconceived spiritual ideas. They must confront and aim to realize the inescapable challenge of mind and life directly, becoming, at the level of identity, a practitioner of inner work, a craftsman of consciousness, as I like to say. And in this evolution of identity, speculation becomes secondary. Precision, observation, and realization are our guiding principles and take precedence. And every experience is data, every thought is a mechanism to be examined. It's here where the preliminary self-inquiry process takes root. We can start with the simplest, most unavoidable questions. Questions like, who am I? How did I get here? Why am I here? What is my purpose? And what, in all sobriety, do I truly know? And if you have the daring, and it does require daring, follow these questions to their radical edge, sort of flirting on the schizophrenic brink, to that thin line where the mind is almost having a panic attack. Sincerely entertain the idea. Did you wake up this morning? Or have you found yourself already awake in a world scripted with memories you don't remember authoring? Did somebody somewhere plant these experiences inside of you? Or are we simply vessels of an ongoing illusion? Is my life self-directed, or am I a puppet of forces I do not yet perceive? And when you sincerely reckon with these questions, notice the changes in the body and mind. What happens to the nervous system? What sensations arise at the solar plexus or the throat? What happens to the breath, to the internal dialogue? What pleasantries and comforting worldviews does the mind conjure up to keep the existential crisis at bay? And we can let these questions slice through any comfort, any illusion and pretense of what you think you know. And it's important here to realize that the goal here is not to find answers. Have questions but never final answers. And if an answer does come, question that too and return to the unknowing. One of the most underrated spiritual teachers of our time is a man called Richard Rose. And here's a simplification of his words. But from here, we can begin to back away from the untruth. And at this stage, we do not know what the truth is or in which direction it lies. Capital T truth this is. But paradoxically, it's already staring us right in the face. It's with us right now. But for now, the best we can do is recognise the untruths and discard them, and follow the path of negation, of subtraction. And it becomes a process of uncovering the ignorance within ourselves and outside of ourselves, and completely rejecting it. A quote from Richard Rose then, quote, "Wisdom and truth come to a man who can truly say, 'I am ignorant, I do not know.' Distrust everything, including yourself. Take distrust to its very end, and you will find that all could be doubted was false, and only what can withstand the fire of the fiercest doubt is true. For what remains is life itself, of which doubt is the self-cleansing process." Unquote. So, under scrutiny, what do we actually find then? Well, we found we are embodied in these human forms with no real idea of how we got here or what our purpose is, with a storehouse of memories that we can't fully account for. But beyond that, what else is certain? Well, I have sense faculties that I know reveal only fragments of the phenomenal world. I can feel this interaction with the ground at all times, and I cannot seem to get away from it. People tell me this is called gravity, which is just a 3-syllable noise that I make with my mouth. There's some sort of force or battery that makes my heart beat without my consent. And if I hold my breath for long enough, then everything in me screams to let go and to take a breath in. I look around and I see forms that appear to be made up of the elements, but I'm also surrounded by phenomena without any substance or weight. I see the light beams, I hear sound, and things like thought, imagination, and memory. None of these aren't made of anything. And this mind, what is it exactly? Without looking up a dictionary definition, can you coherently and satisfyingly explain, right now, what the mind actually is? And remember, precision is our guiding principle. So if we cannot precisely define the mind, we have no business speaking of mastery of the mind, or perfection of the mind, or sovereignty of the mind. So with the mind, let's investigate further. Where is it located? What is its scope and its authority? By what mechanism does it conjure images and voices and memories and even worlds? You see, we cling to assumptions, yet without understanding the mind's function, we are completely blind. And therefore every certainty is borrowed, and every truth that we embrace is contingent upon a faculty we don't yet even understand. And our convictions are exposed to be pretty paper thin, really. And it's here where the honest practitioner's path begins. So among the many psycho-spiritual and phenomenal and metaphysical systems that humanity have produced, it is quite apparent to me that the most reliable and practical technology for navigating this terrain is the teachings of the Buddha, which I will call the doctrine or the practice of awakening, known as the Dharma or the Dharma. I won't be calling this Buddhism in reference to the various exoteric religions and schools and forms. Instead, as I said, I will refer to this as the practice of awakening, just to ensure that we remain within the realm of esoteric technology and methodology. The practice of awakening, then, supposedly laid down by the Buddha, the perfectly awakened one, seems to reflect the work of a masterful technician of the mind. So he outlined a path to complete freedom and created a pragmatic technology and a rigorous training program to achieve that freedom. Now I say supposedly laid down by the Buddha just to remain true to the philosophical honesty that I outlined before. I wasn't there, I never met the man, I can't know for sure. But what I do know, and perhaps this is the defining distinction between Buddhism as a religion, and all other religions really, and the practice of awakening, is that even if the narrative or the story or the mythos was proven false tomorrow, if the historical Buddha never existed and it was all made up, the efficacy of the method and the technology, the efficacy of the practice for mastering the mind, would still stand true, kind of true and tested. Now, as a practitioner, I care about results above all else. However, unlike certain secularists or humanist thinkers, I do not dismiss the exoteric religious expressions as just like cultural baggage. When we study ourselves and know ourselves really well, we know others, and we discover that human beings are not fundamentally logical or purely rational creatures. We are creatures capable of moments of logic, reason, and clarity. And beneath those moments lies a deeper, older substratum, the religious impulse and the pull towards ritual attitude, symbolic expressions, devotion, and communal belonging. These have always been woven into the human condition. They aren't just empty theatrics, but they carry real energy, they bind communities, focus intention, and provide fertile ground for transformation. And given the vast range of temperaments and character types, it's pretty unreasonable to expect one single path of expression or one universal method of engaging with the sacred. People unfold completely differently, and their forms of devotion and practice will naturally reflect that diversity. This is precisely why the inner technology of awakening can be used regardless of one's theological beliefs or inherited practices. One can cultivate understanding of the mind and still engage wholeheartedly as a Christian or a neo-pagan or any other tradition as a devotional type. And not as a contradiction here, but as an extension of inner clarity. In fact, I would argue that this is actually essential. With a working understanding of the mind, we can then consciously relate to the exoteric forms rather than being unconsciously shaped by them. We can choose, construct, or reinterpret supports that strengthen and deepen the inner work. And once their purpose is understood, we can then rightly select or create the cultural, ethical, and symbolic frameworks that anchor us in the practice. Not as a superstition, but as an architecture for the inner ascent. And when used wisely, these forms become our guardrails and our rafts. So they become tools for liberation rather than shackles of dogma. There's a quote here from The Doctrine of Awakening by Julius Evola. I believe he's quoting a Zen master, and the quote goes as follows. The Buddhist canonical literature is likened to a window from which one contemplates the great scene of nature. But to live in this scene, you must jump outside the window. Trees, grass, mountains, streams, stars, the sea, the moon. With this alphabet, the texts of Zen are written. Unquote. And again, I return to the question, what do I truly know? Through ruthless honesty and observation of the natural workings of life, through lived experience, sober study, and the work of the technician, a story or at least a direction seems to emerge. And this feels neither fantastical or naive, but grounded in direct experience into the natural order. And a tentative conclusion seems to form that perhaps our path may be one of deliberate evolution. And once more, since I cannot claim any of this as absolute fact, I hold it instead as a working hypothesis just born from my study. I have a great quote from Tom Robbins here. Quote, deep down, all of us are probably aware that some kind of mystical evolution is our true task. Yet we suppress the notion with considerable force, because to admit it is to acknowledge that most of our political gyrations, our religious dogmas, social ambitions, and financial ploys are not merely counterproductive, but ultimately trivial. Unquote. Our studies of nature show that evolution takes struggle and tension. We have birth pangs and growth pains. We know that for an oak tree to grow, the acorn must crack. And for a chicken to be born, again, the egg must crack. There's always this overcoming of resistance in all domains. And the inner evolution is seemingly no different here, for it manifests through wisdom and ordeal, through struggle and the friction of living, through the pressures and tensions that push a man to look at himself without flinching. Where wisdom is present, the path seems to be clarified and frictionless. But where wisdom is absent, struggle and discontent always intensify, demanding payment in discomfort and endurance. And when I speak of wisdom here, I'm speaking of seeing into the nature of reality for what it truly is. Wisdom as a transcendental form of knowledge, the supreme form of knowledge, to know by seeing, to become cognition, to become the truth, to become vision, to know it in your bones, as I like to say. Now, our vitalist approach to our evolution, therefore, is to cultivate wisdom, character, and vitality. Because where wisdom falters and our understanding fails, and it will, it's often perseverance and a certain inner potential and momentum that carry us through. So our vitality, our life force, and our character will be both our engine and the backbone to carry any burdens. And if there is enough potential in us, enough vitality saved from wasteful living, then we can meet any struggle not as a victim, but as both challenger and victor, with a steady mind, a glint in the eye, and even a nice grin on the face. Now, in a healthy and well-ordered age, we would ideally acquire wisdom through elders and with the guidance of honourable and accomplished spiritual teachers or companions. And if you're lucky enough to find these, then cherish them with your whole heart. But if not, do not worry, there is fortune there too. Now regardless, we still must work diligently and learn through a measured study of the great traditions, the philosophers and the sacred texts that reveal the architecture of reality, as well as through objective discernment of the natural order as it truly stands. Do not confine yourself to the words of one single teacher or tradition. I recommend casting a wide net and be open to finding truth anywhere and everywhere, but do develop a keen sense for bullshit and swiftly step back when you detect it. We sharpen our wisdom further by continuing to observe the world and ourselves unflinchingly and objectively, stripped of illusion, seeing things for what they are, not what we wish to believe. And this means examining even the darkest depths of ourselves and the world. We look at everything, warts and all. One of my favourite shifts in perspective from studying the practice of awakening is the way language is used. Instead of framing actions as right or wrong, the language focuses on skillful and unskillful. And this is perfect for the practitioner. With careful attention, we can start to discern which acts, thoughts and words are skillful and which are unskillful, and we can tell by the results and the fruits that they produce. In the practice of awakening, there is a natural sequence. Living ethically and cultivating skillful conduct leads to a clearer, more unified and less distracted mind. And this clarity in turn fosters insights, wisdom and deeper transcendental knowledge. And then the wisdom that we gain highlights the continuing importance of ethical living and skillful actions, which then support the development of even greater wisdom. And this creates a reinforcing spiral. Interestingly, there is a reciprocal relationship here. It takes wisdom to live ethically, yet living ethically is also a path to acquiring more wisdom. For someone already possessing a modicum of wisdom, then adopting moral precepts or self-governing rules and codes of conduct may come quite naturally. But for someone less experienced or less wise, these principles are essential guides and supports for cultivating both clarity and momentum. Now this is very important. Listen in. It is no sign of weakness to need these supports. As men, above all, we tend to value the truth, and the truth is that sometimes we need help and external supports. It is not weak to ask for help, okay? Guidelines, precepts, rules and commandments are not to be seen as imposed slavery, but as skillful boundaries, and I like to imagine them as segments of armour that protect us. We don the armour of ethical codes by choice, knowing that they act as forms and structures that prevent the leakage of energy, contain it, elevate it, and safeguard the development of the inner man. And in our circles, when we think of vitality, images of jacked, hulking, Mike Mensa type Olympian athletes often come to mind. But I think this is misleading. While having a strong, healthy and aesthetically pleasing vessel is certainly worthwhile and holds tons of potential, the kind of mind warp of social media these days and steroid use and what's called physique inflation, this all needs to be set aside. Building extreme muscle and curating a sort of precarious image consumes a ridiculous amount of energy, and this is energy that could be better spent sharpening your mind or cultivating your inner power. So instead, let's work with the principle of enough. What is my North Star? What direction am I heading? And am I strong enough, healthy enough, fit enough, wealthy enough, comfortable enough to achieve that goal? And these questions tend to shift the focus then from sort of inflated extremes to just sufficiency and purpose. And the truth is, as men, we generally already possess the raw faculties and capacities needed to generate the vitality and potential to achieve pretty much any goal. The real challenge is in not wasting what we do have. And what we need is discipline and self-mastery to avoid squandering our energy. So guard your energy, focus it, and stop leaking it into useless domains, okay? Your vitality is not just physical, but mental, emotional, and spiritual. You must treat it like the most valuable substance in existence. So, get your house in order, and not just your immediate environment, but also your inner world. Your consciousness, your emotions, your body, senses, and energy must start to be integrated harmoniously. So stay healthy, keep things clean and simple, and set up your life so that you can think clearly and move freely. Continuously inquire into your own character. Shine a light onto all of the shadow aspects of your personality and identify the habits or the tendencies that aren't serving you as a noble man and a spiritual technician, and turn yourself into an interior explorer. Inspect every nook and cranny of your psyche, and know your mind as well as your bedroom, because ultimately that is the only real home you will ever have. And to maximize vitality, one must be pretty ruthless with distractions and harmful habits and anything that drains energy. I highly recommend, or at least aim to aspire to, no drugs, no alcohol, or certainly no alcohol binges anyway. No all-nighters, try and limit promiscuity, compulsive masturbation, and limit any unnecessary stress. Give up any gambling or any vacations and things you can't afford. So get your health, fitness and environment in order. First and foremost, I recommend paying off any debts if you can, and make amends where needed. Say you're sorry to who you need to say sorry to, patch up those familial disputes, and start to take responsibility for your own life. Now, when it comes to others who drain your energy, then kind of true equanimity and sovereignty over your senses take a fair bit of training. But you can start small. Ditch the acquaintances and the toxic companions that drag you down. Avoid the social realms where you have to bite your tongue and repress healthy expression, and these places that just no longer serve your higher ideals. Now, take decisive action in these areas, but guard against the hardening of the mind and the heart. So remain open, flexible, and curious. I like to say embrace the world with the wonder of a child. But when we clear the ground, suddenly your energy, focus, and vitality have room to grow. And I have a quote here that I love. Quote, "In a revolutionary epoch, sometimes men taste every novelty, sicken of them all, and return to ancient principles so long disused that they seem refreshingly hearty when rediscovered." Unquote. By Russell Kirk. So with our character, we cultivate this not by just idle reflection, but through deeds of trial and daring acts. So we have small deeds that demand sincerity and consistency, and courageous acts that challenge us, that require risk and shatter our limiting beliefs. And character is truly forged in action and hardship, through a life deliberately lived and never ever in theory. We strengthen it through physical disciplines and inner exercises, and a commitment to these guiding principles that elevate us rather than bind us. And these principles can be external ethical frameworks or self-imposed codes, moral or behavioural supports. That, as I mentioned before, they're not there to repress us, but to keep us honest, to keep us aligned with our highest potential. So for myself, the bare minimum pieces of armour that I will wear are the 5 precepts that the Buddha encouraged as the base ethical code for one who practices the path of awakening. And these are not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, no sexual misconduct, and no intoxicants that lead to unskillful behaviour. So to wrap up with one more quote, I don't know who said this, but it's a fantastic one. Quote, "As if a man was to come up to a spring of clear, sweet water and curse it, it would still continue to bubble up water good enough to drink. He could throw in mud or dung, and in no time the spring will break it down, wash it away, and take no colour from it. How then can you secure an everlasting, glistening spring within? By keeping yourself at all times intent on freedom, and staying kind, simple, and decent." Unquote. And so to conclude then, remember this above all: for every step we take toward wisdom, take 3 steps toward the refinement of your character, because in the end it is our character, our courage, and our integrity that shape our destiny. So go forth with vigilant attention and fare the way with courage and daring. Guard that inner spring, move on in your mystical evolution, and build a life in which both your mind and your character rise, unyielding and luminous, and against these tides of mediocrity and distraction of our age. Stay well, stay lucky. See you soon.